Racist cops slap the wrong judge. 4 minutes later, their empire begins to crumble. A slap in court, or a spark that ignites a reckoning. When two racist cops strike a quiet black woman in a packed courtroom, they think it's just another abuse of power. What they don't know: she's not a bystander. She is the judge. And in the next 4 minutes, everything they've built starts to crumble. This is a story of arrogance, injustice, and the kind of justice that doesn't whisper, it roars. Stick around because the twist? You won't believe it until you see it. Charleston, South Carolina, had always felt like a city at war with itself: graceful architecture, cobblestone streets, and whispers of an old world barely masking the deep, unresolved tensions beneath. The sun had barely crested the Atlantic horizon when Judge Clara May arrived at the courthouse. At 62, she carried herself with a quiet authority that needed no introduction. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her sharp brown eyes missed nothing, not even the microaggressions people thought they could slip past her. This courthouse, cold and towering with its neoclassical columns, had seen centuries of justice and injustice. Clara had walked its marble halls for over 3 decades, first as a defense attorney fighting uphill battles for clients who were too often guilty of being poor and black, then as a prosecutor determined to clean the rot from inside the house. And now? A judge. The first black woman to sit on this city's highest bench. And some folks still couldn't get used to that. Clara knew the price of breaking ceilings. They didn't just throw rocks at you, they tried to pretend you weren't even there. As she stepped through the security checkpoint, the guards nodded respectfully. Some even smiled. Clara gave a curt nod, her mind already on the morning docket. It was supposed to be a routine arraignment: vandalism, juvenile defendant, bond hearing. But her instincts, those finely tuned, decades-old instincts, tingled. Something about this morning felt off. The clerk outside her courtroom met her with a strained smile. Good morning, Judge May. Officer Boone's already inside. Clara paused. Boone? Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Travis Boone, arresting officer in the Jameson case. He's been insistent. Clara felt her jaw tighten. She knew Boone. Everyone in Charleston law enforcement knew Boone. Mid-40s, clean-cut, third-generation cop, a walking legacy of power unchecked. He was the kind of man who carried a smirk like it was standard issue and had enough favors banked across departments to stay afloat no matter what complaint landed on his file. The problem was, those complaints never stayed. Harassment. Excessive force. Misconduct. Always swept away like dust under a marble rug. Clara had read his name too many times in reports that reeked of arrogance. She stepped into the courtroom quietly, not yet in her robes, not yet on the bench. Boone was already standing at the prosecution table, arms crossed, expression sour. The teenager he'd arrested, no older than 16, sat with his public defender, eyes wide and unsure. Boone didn't glance at Clara as she entered. Instead, he barked toward the clerk, let's get this started. I don't have all day. I suggest you find the time, Clara said evenly. Boone finally turned and stared. There was a split-second pause where confusion flashed across his face. He was trying to place her. Clerk? Assistant? Maybe the bailiff? She wasn't robed, wasn't seated, so to him, she wasn't important. You here for the defense? He said smugly. Clara didn't answer. She moved toward the side table to review a file left there. The room was mostly empty, just a few early arriving journalists, a handful of attorneys, and 2 officers at the back wall. Boone, now clearly irritated, stormed over toward her. K. I'm talking to you, And then it happened. A sharp, open-handed slap cracked through the air. The room froze. A collective gasp rippled through those present. Papers stopped rustling. A coffee cup nearly dropped. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker in response. Clara didn't move. Her cheek stung, but she didn't reach for it, didn't flinch. Slowly, she turned her head, locking eyes with the man who had just laid hands on her. Boone stepped back, almost surprised by his own action, but not ashamed. Not even close, his lips curled with something close to disdain. "You people need to learn some respect," he muttered. Someone in the back whispered, "Asterisk, oh my God." Asterisk, another voice, "Asterisk, is she okay?" Asterisk. But Clara's gaze never left Boone. Not for a second. Boone straightened, oblivious to the trap he'd just sprung for himself. "Asterisk, I don't care who you think you are. You don't get to strut around this courtroom acting like asterisk." Clara stepped forward. Just once. Then again. The silence tightened like a rope. The clerk whispered, "Asterisk, she's not in her robe." Asterisk. But Boone wasn't listening. He didn't see the shift in the room, the subtle horror beginning to bloom on the faces around him. And then Clara spoke. Calmly. Coldly. And with every ounce of authority the robe did not need to give her. "Asterisk, is this how you treat officers of the court, Sergeant?" Asterisk. The color drained from one officer's face at the back of the room. A lawyer dropped their pen. Boone blinked. "Asterisk, what are you talking about?" Asterisk. Clara stepped onto the platform. Up. Up. Then turned and faced him from the bench. For one long, shattering moment, nobody breathed. Sergeant Boone stood like a statue, eyes locked on Judge Clara May as she took her seat behind the bench. The sound of the gavel striking wood hadn't even echoed yet, but the judgment had already begun. He blinked twice. Once in disbelief. The second because, for the first time in his career, he was afraid. Clara clasped her hands in front of her, slowly, deliberately. She didn't speak right away. She let the silence weigh down on every single person in the room. Even the bailiff, Officer Mills, a steady man who'd served with discipline for years, looked like he was holding his breath. "Sergeant Boone," Clara finally said, her voice calm but sharp enough to draw blood, "Asterisk, did you just strike me in this courtroom?" Asterisk. Boone's mouth opened, then closed. His tongue darted to the side of his mouth, as if searching for a lie that wouldn't come. I didn't know who you were," he muttered, already defensive. "That is not what I asked," Clara said, cutting cleanly across his weak attempt to explain. Asterisk, did you just put your hand on me? Yes or no? Asterisk. More shifting in the gallery. Someone, maybe a junior lawyer, had already pulled out their phone. Cameras were rolling. This wasn't just a moment of misconduct, it was about to become evidence. Boone puffed up, his voice rising, trying to reclaim control. Asterisk, you came at me. I didn't recognize you. You weren't in your robe, asterisk. You thought I was beneath you, Clara said. The words landed hard. Boone's jaw clenched. Asterisk, you're twisting this into something it's not. Asterisk. I'm not twisting anything, she replied, steely. Asterisk, I'm describing exactly what happened. You assaulted a woman, unprovoked, in a courtroom. Your only defense is ignorance and arrogance. Asterisk. He took a step forward before remembering where he was. He glanced at the other officers standing at the back of the courtroom. No one met his eye. Clara's voice dropped to a tone even sharper. Asterisk, if I were a white male judge sitting here with the same title, would you have slapped me without knowing who I was? Asterisk. Boone said nothing. But his silence was the loudest admission of guilt he'd ever made. I'll take that as a no, she said coldly. Asterisk, and now you've compounded that assault with defiance. Asterisk. You're overreacting, he finally snapped. Asterisk, I was doing my job. That kid, asterisk, he pointed toward the defendant, a thin, nervous teenager who looked like he wanted to vanish behind his attorney's chair, asterisk, is a thug. I caught him with spray paint and asterisk. Asterisk, enough. Asterisk, Clara's voice thundered. The gavel slammed once. Then twice. Asterisk, you do not get to justify assault by pointing fingers at a juvenile defendant. Asterisk. She turned to the clerk, her tone crisp. Asterisk, Miss Harper, please enter into the record that Officer Travis Boone has admitted, on the record, to striking a sitting judge in a courtroom without cause or provocation. Asterisk. Boone took a step back, finally understanding that the air around him was shifting fast. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug like before. No union rep was going to pop in and make it disappear. Not this time. Clara glanced at the bailiff. Asterisk. Officer Mills, is this courtroom currently under video surveillance? Asterisk. Yes, Your Honor, he replied immediately, his voice taut. Asterisk. Good. Then the record will also reflect visual evidence. Asterisk. Boone's eyes flicked toward the corners of the ceiling, where two small red recording lights blinked silently back at him. That was when his expression truly changed. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was scared. I didn't mean, he began again, but Clara raised a single hand and stopped him cold. Asterisk. You've had 20 years of not meaning it, asterisk, she said. Asterisk. I've read your file. I've seen the complaints. I've seen how they disappeared. But here's what's different today, Sergeant, this happened in front of witnesses. Under cameras. To a judge. Asterisk. He opened his mouth again, but she didn't let him continue. Asterisk. I have spent my life watching men like you mistake force for law, mistake fear for order, and mistake silence for consent. Not today. Asterisk. She stood from the bench. The whole room straightened with her. In accordance with the authority vested in me as a circuit judge for the state of South Carolina, she announced, asterisk, and under Title 16, Chapter 3, Article 1 of the South Carolina Code of Laws, I hereby place Officer Travis Boone under formal judicial investigation for criminal assault on a public official. Asterisk. The gasp from the back of the room was audible. Clara turned to the bailiff. Asterisk. Officer Mills, place Sergeant Boone under temporary detainment. Do not apply cuffs yet, he is still a sworn officer, and I expect professionalism. But he is not to leave this room. Asterisk. Boone's mouth dropped open. You can't be serious, he cried, chest rising with disbelief. I didn't even know. And yet, Clara said quietly, her eyes unblinking, asterisk, you knew enough to hit me. Asterisk. Boone looked around wildly, but no one stepped forward. No allies. No defense. Just the slow tightening of the noose he'd tied for himself. The sound of the courtroom door shutting behind the bailiff echoed like a warning shot through the room. Officer Mills stood near Boone, hand resting lightly on his belt, not threatening, but clearly ready. Boone stood rigid, face flushed red, jaw tight, and fists clenched at his sides like he was holding back a storm of rage. Clara remained standing behind the bench, her gaze pinned to him like a steel rod. She didn't blink. Didn't soften. She gave him no escape hatch, no space to pivot into denial. Your Honor, came a voice from the gallery. It was the prosecutor assigned to the vandalism case, an older man, white, thinning hair, and suddenly very pale. Asterisk. Do you want to proceed with the docket? Asterisk. Clara turned her gaze slowly toward him. Asterisk. I will decide that momentarily. But first, I want to address the gallery, because what just happened in this room is no longer a matter of courtroom decorum. It is a matter of law, precedent, and public trust. Asterisk. She looked toward the journalists. Asterisk. You all witnessed an on-duty officer physically assault the judge presiding over this courtroom. You heard his words. You saw his posture. I want you to record that. I want you to remember it, because if the law can't protect those who enforce it fairly, then we are no longer in a democracy. We are in something much darker. Asterisk. The room was dead silent. Even the click of keyboards had stopped. Boone scoffed, suddenly unable to help himself. Asterisk. Are you really going to turn this into a damn press moment? Asterisk. Clara slowly turned back to him. Asterisk. Is that what you think this is, Sergeant? Public accountability? A moment of theater? Asterisk. He said nothing. She stepped around the bench and came down the stairs, heels striking like a clock counting down. Asterisk. You've been protected for a long time, haven't you? Asterisk. She said softly, so that only those close could hear, but the microphone still caught every word. Asterisk. I've seen officers like you before. The kind who walk into a courtroom already assuming everyone in it is beneath you. The kind who say I didn't know when they mean I didn't care. Asterisk. Boone's eyes flicked nervously toward Mills, but the bailiff didn't move. Let me tell you what's about to happen, Clara continued. Asterisk Internal Affairs is being notified. I will personally be submitting a formal complaint to the Attorney General's office before noon. The footage of this incident will be sealed for legal review, but the press in this room? They already have enough to make it headline news before lunch. Asterisk. Boone's mouth opened. Asterisk, you're destroying my life over a misunderstanding. Asterisk. No, Sergeant, Clara said. Asterisk, you destroyed your career the moment your hand struck my face. Asterisk. There it was. Sharp. Final. He shifted on his feet, glancing again at the teenager he'd arrested. The boy was watching him now, not in fear, not anymore, but in something Boone couldn't quite recognize. Pity. The same look he'd seen in mug shots of the men he'd arrested right before the cuffs went on. I've served this city for 20 years, Boone said, louder now, almost pleading. Asterisk, I've risked my life in these streets. I've taken down real criminals. And now you're going to throw me to the wolves because I made a mistake in a tense moment? Asterisk. Clara turned, walking back up to the bench. I'm not throwing you to the wolves, Sergeant, she said as she ascended the steps. Asterisk, I'm handing you to the law. You've spent 2 decades hiding behind a badge. Today, that badge doesn't shield you. It holds you accountable. Asterisk. She sat down, her robe folding neatly around her like armor. She tapped the microphone once, then addressed the room. This courtroom is not adjourned, she said. Asterisk, but the arraignment for the defendant in the vandalism case will be rescheduled for tomorrow. The arresting officer has compromised the integrity of this hearing. Asterisk. The defense attorney for the teenager stood, adjusting his tie nervously. Asterisk, thank you, Your Honor. Asterisk. Clara nodded. Asterisk, take your client out through the west exit. Escort him safely. Asterisk. The boy stood, glancing back once at Boone as he walked out. His face was unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. Less curled. Less apologetic. Boone, meanwhile, had gone quiet. His eyes no longer burned. They darted. He was thinking. Calculating. Waiting. Clara watched him like one might study a dangerous animal that just realized it had been caged. Then she leaned into the microphone again. Asterisk, Officer Mills, please escort Sergeant Boone to Holding Room B. I will be contacting Internal Affairs and the Chief of Police myself. This matter is no longer internal. It is criminal. Asterisk. Boone didn't resist, but his jaw was locked so tightly you could hear the muscles grind as Mills gently tapped his elbow, guiding him toward the side exit. Boone said, just loud enough for Clara to hear, Asterisk, you think you've won, don't you? Asterisk. Clara didn't look at him. She just whispered. Asterisk, I think, for once, the right person is losing. Asterisk. And the courtroom doors closed behind him. The aftermath. The hallway outside the courtroom was abuzz with electricity. Word had already started to spread, fast. A judge had been assaulted by a cop. Not just any cop, but Travis Boone. And not just any judge, but Clara May. By the time Clara stepped into her chambers, 2 voicemails were already waiting, one from the Chief of Police's office, another from a contact at Internal Affairs. She didn't listen to them yet. Instead, she removed her robe with slow, steady hands and placed it gently on the hanger by the door. Then she looked at herself in the mirror. The red mark on her cheek had faded to a faint line, but it was still there. She stared at it for a long time, not because it hurt, but because she wanted to remember how it felt. How many people had left this courthouse with worse marks on their skin, on their dignity, and never had a moment like this? How many had been ignored, dismissed, silenced? A sharp knock broke her thoughts. It was Carter Lang, her bailiff of nearly a decade, broad-shouldered, stone-faced, but fiercely loyal. He stepped in, shut the door gently behind him, and stood with his hands behind his back like always. But something about his posture was tighter than usual. They've taken him to holding room B, Carter said. Asterisk Internal Affairs is already sending someone. 2 agents. ETA 20 minutes. Asterisk. Clara nodded. Asterisk thank you. Asterisk. Carter hesitated. Asterisk Judge. I heard from one of the clerks. Word is Boone's union already made a call. They're moving fast, trying to contain it. Asterisk. Of course they are, Clara said. Asterisk but they're too late. This isn't going away. Asterisk. She walked behind her desk, sat down, and pulled a yellow legal pad from her drawer. Her handwriting was clean, almost architectural. She began listing. Incident asterisk courtroom assault. Status asterisk on record. Witnesses asterisk present. Cameras asterisk active. Officers record asterisk prior complaints, X5 documented in last 7 years. Connection asterisk ADA Ramsey's office approved dismissal of 2 prior excessive force cases with Boone. Judge notes asterisk request review of dismissed cases. Carter watched in silence until she finally looked up. Asterisk I want every case where Boone was lead arresting officer or testified in the last 10 years pulled and flagged. Asterisk. Asterisk that'll be a lot. Asterisk. Clara's eyes narrowed. Asterisk then we'd better start now. Asterisk. Carter gave a slow nod, then turned to leave. But as he reached for the door handle, Clara said quietly. Asterisk they think this was about a slap. They don't realize, they just opened the door we've been pounding on for years. Asterisk. The door closed behind him. The fallout. 30 minutes later, 2 internal affairs agents arrived. One was a no-nonsense black woman named Agent Rosalind Keene. The other, a younger Latino man with sharp eyes and an even sharper tone, Agent Felix Reyes. Clara had met Keene before. She was known for one thing, being the department's cleaner, not of messes, but of corruption. They sat across from Clara at her conference table. Keene flipped open a thick file already labeled Boone, Travis. We've been watching him for a while, Keene admitted. Asterisk but his records are just clean enough to avoid action. Too many convenient absences of evidence. Too many cases closed with no follow-up. Asterisk. Convenient, Clara muttered. Asterisk that word should be a felony. Asterisk. Reyes leaned forward. Asterisk your courtroom surveillance is already backed up on our servers, audio and video. We've confirmed the strike, the statements, and your response. We've also noted who else was present. Asterisk. Asterisk the chain of accountability is about to be tested. Asterisk. I want more than accountability, Clara said. Asterisk I want the foundation cracked wide open. Asterisk. Keene studied her for a moment. Asterisk Judge, how far are you willing to go with this? Asterisk. Clara didn't hesitate. Asterisk all the way. Asterisk. Reyes nodded once, slowly. Asterisk then I think it's time we show you something. Asterisk. He pulled out a thumb drive, inserted it into his tablet, and turned the screen toward her. It was an internal report from 2019. A civilian complaint, anonymous. The accusation was brutal. Boone had beaten a 17-year-old boy during an arrest, doctored the body cam footage, and the original video had gone missing. The report had been quietly closed due to lack of evidence. Clara scrolled down, and stopped cold. The internal reviewer who had dismissed the complaint, Detective M. Whitaker. She looked up. Asterisk as in Captain Whitaker? Boone's former training officer? Asterisk. Reyes confirmed. Asterisk retired last year. But the entire command staff under him? Still in place. Asterisk. And now, Keene added, asterisk we found 3 more dismissed complaints. Same patterns. Same signatures. Boone's name always appears, and so does someone else. Asterisk. She tapped the screen, and a new name appeared. ADA Carson E. Ramsey. The very same prosecutor who had been assigned to dozens of Boone's cases. Who'd sat in her courtroom more times than she could count. who always seemed just a little too eager to strike deals with law enforcement. Who, now that she thought about it, had once given Boone a sly pat on the back after a particularly shaky testimony. Clara leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. This wasn't just about a violent cop. This was a system. A network. Boone wasn't the rot. He was just the smell. What do you want to do, Judge? Keen asked. Clara looked at them both, her voice quiet but laced with steel. I want a list, she said. Of every case Boone touched. Every complaint buried. Every prosecutor who made it disappear. And I want them delivered to my chambers by sunrise tomorrow. Ray has raised a brow. That'll take all night. Then don't stop working. Keen smiled faintly. I think we're going to get along just fine. The reckoning. By 6 a.m. the next morning, the courthouse was awake, but barely. The building sat in eerie silence, its long halls echoing only the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional shuffle of a janitor's mop. But inside Judge Clara May's chambers, no one was asleep. Not her. Not her clerk. Not the internal affairs agents who had pulled an all-nighter digging through 10 years of sealed complaints. Carter arrived with coffee and silence. He placed the steaming cup on Clara's desk without a word, then took a seat in the corner, eyes scanning a folder thick enough to choke a printer. Clara didn't even look up from her legal pad. How bad is it? Carter finally asked, though he already knew. Clara spoke without pausing her writing. 19 complaints, all involving Boone. 12 against other officers under his supervision. 4 prosecutors who refused to press charges despite strong evidence. At least 2 body cam videos that went missing under internal review. Carter let out a long breath, running a hand over his jaw. That's not a bad apple. That's a rotting orchard. Clara looked up, her eyes dark and clear. And it's been protected. Buried. Maintained. Systematically. Before Carter could respond, her office phone rang. She answered with a curt Judge May. The voice on the other end was calm, male, and disturbingly familiar. Clara. It's Chief Nolan. She leaned back. I was expecting your call, though not this early. I assume you know why I'm calling. I assume you've seen the footage, she replied. A pause. I have. Another pause. I'm not calling to defend Boone. No, Clara said. You're calling to control the explosion. Nolan didn't deny it. Clara, he said quietly, you need to understand what you're stepping into. This isn't about one officer losing his temper. You're pulling on a thread that could tear this department apart. That's exactly the idea, she said without hesitation. I'm not your enemy, he replied. You've been silent for years. Silence is complicity, Chief. He sighed on the other end. I've got the union breathing down my neck, the mayor demanding answers, and now I hear you've contacted internal affairs directly. Because your department didn't. You're escalating this. No, Clara said firmly. I'm revealing it. There was silence. And then a change in tone, sharper, less polite. Look, Nolan, he said. You want Boone to pay? Fine. He's a problem. I'll back your request for charges. But if you keep dragging in names, commanders, prosecutors, past leadership, you're going to cause a collapse none of us can clean up. Clara's voice was steady. Then maybe it's time we stopped trying to clean, and started rebuilding. The line went dead. She stared at the phone for a long moment before quietly placing it back in the cradle. Carter raised an eyebrow. Asterisk, that sounded like a threat wrapped in a peace offering. Asterisk. Clara nodded. Asterisk, he's scared. Good. Asterisk. Just then, her door opened without a knock. Agent Keene entered, face grim, holding a slim red file. She didn't waste time. Asterisk, we found something you need to see. Asterisk. Clara stood, meeting her halfway as Keene opened the folder. A transcript. An audio recording. Surveillance audio from the precinct, dated 2 years ago. Boone's voice, unmistakable, laughing in a locker room. Asterisk, you ever see her up close? That Judge Clara? Something walks around like she owns the courthouse. Thinks the robe makes her bulletproof. Asterisk. Then another voice, still unidentified. Asterisk, she ever come after you? Asterisk. Boone laughed again. Asterisk, let her try. I've got friends higher than her. She steps too far, and I swear, she'll never even make it to the bench. One complaint, and poof. Activist judge out the door. Asterisk. Clara stared at the page, then looked up at Keene. Asterisk, who else heard this? Asterisk. Asterisk, we just pulled it. It was flagged in another investigation but buried under non-priority files. Asterisk. Asterisk, in the second voice? Asterisk. Asterisk, still running voice recognition. But we think it may be Ada Ramsey. Asterisk. Clara's pulse ticked once in her throat. If you can confirm that. We will, Keene said. Asterisk, but there's more. Asterisk. She pulled another document, a list of recent internal case reviews. There was an emergency meeting at the DA's office last night, Keene said. Asterisk, someone's trying to pull your case from the bench, claiming conflict of interest. Saying you can't preside over a case where you were the victim. Asterisk. Clara's jaw tightened. Asterisk, they're trying to remove me. Asterisk. Carter cursed under his breath. Keene nodded. Asterisk, if they succeed, they'll bury Boone in a minor misconduct charge and cut him loose with early retirement. You'll be recused, and the narrative becomes emotionally compromised judge. Asterisk. Judge Clara walked back to her desk. The clock on the wall read 7:02 a.m. The courthouse would open officially in under an hour. I want a public hearing, she said. Asterisk, I want the press there. I want the record to show that I requested the transfer, not because I couldn't be impartial, but because I refused to let this go quietly. Asterisk. Keene gave a slow, impressed nod. Asterisk, you want to go on offense? Asterisk. Clara looked at her, eyes burning. No, she said. Asterisk, I want to go nuclear. Asterisk. Outside her chambers, staff were arriving. Phones were ringing. Journalists were gathering like birds sensing a storm. And from behind the blinds, Clara could already see a black SUV parked across the street, watching. Waiting. Someone was coming for her. But they'd better come prepared, because the moment they tried to silence her, she'd make damn sure the whole city heard her scream. The showdown. By 9 a.m., the courthouse felt like a pressure cooker. Reporters lingered in corridors. Court clerks whispered in doorways. Attorneys avoided eye contact. Everyone felt it. Something big was unraveling. Judge Clara May stepped into the main courtroom, flanked by her bailiff Carter and Internal Affairs agent Rosalind Keene. She was not in her robe. She wasn't presiding today. Today, she was fighting. The courtroom buzzed as she entered, and the whispers died fast. At the far end, Assistant District Attorney Carson Ramsey stood beside a representative from the State Ethics Board, a young white man in a tailored gray suit who looked like he hadn't blinked since law school. His name tag read Elliot Parrish, but his expression said Hatchet Man. Judge May, he greeted with a tight smile. Asterisk, we've received your request for a public hearing regarding your recusal. I am here to clarify it, and to make it part of the public record. Asterisk. Clara replied, her voice firm. Asterisk, then let's begin. Asterisk. They sat. the press watching closely from the back rows. I've reviewed the argument filed by the DA's office, Clara began, claiming that I am emotionally compromised and potentially biased due to the incident involving Officer Boone. Ramsey didn't flinch. Our concern is purely procedural. You are the victim of an alleged crime committed by the defendant. Under state statute, a judge may recuse themselves to preserve impartiality. I am fully aware of the statute, Clara interrupted. Which is why I am choosing to step down from the Boone arraignment, not because I am compromised, but because I refuse to let this case be quietly diluted. She turned to the press, locking eyes with a young black female journalist in the front row. I am requesting that the Boone case be elevated to special review status. I am also formally requesting that an independent federal monitor be assigned to investigate the handling of previous cases involving Officer Boone and his direct collaborators. A murmur swept through the room. Ramsey leaned forward. Judge, I caution you, this isn't the forum to suggest conspiracy. I'm not suggesting it, Clara said, voice cold. I'm proving it. She handed a file to Agent Keene, who placed it on the table between them and opened it. For the record, Clara said, inside, 3 complaints, 5 sealed memos, 2 missing body cam logs, and a court transcript from a juvenile trial in 2018. Each one bears Carson Ramsey's signature. She turned to Ramsey. You declined to prosecute Boone in 5 separate cases, despite documented excessive force and contradictory statements under oath. And in every one of those cases, the defense was pressured into accepting plea deals, many involving young black defendants without legal representation. Ramsey went pale, but said nothing. Keene placed a second document on the table. And here's a wire transfer, Mr. Parrish, she said coolly, addressing the ethics board rep. It shows a $15,000 contribution to the state judicial endowment from an entity tied to the Charleston Police Benevolent Fund. That money was earmarked for a scholarship program, but half of it was rerouted into a legal defense fund used last year for Officer Boone. Parrish swallowed. That's not relevant to the ethics motion. It is if it shows collusion, Clara said. If public funds are being funneled into legal shields for corrupt officers, it's more than relevant. It's a pattern. And I'm naming it now. Then she turned toward Ramsey. Tell me, Mr. Ramsey, who protected Boone when the body cam footage disappeared in 2019? The one where a minor ended up in the hospital? Ramsey opened his mouth, then closed it. Clara waited. Agent Keene spoke instead. We believe the footage wasn't lost. It was redirected. Clara raised an eyebrow. To where? Keene slid over a slip of paper. To an external server owned by a private security contractor based in Atlanta. That contractor has a retainer agreement with the Charleston mayor's office. And who approved that contract? She looked at Ramsey. He said nothing. Keene delivered the final blow. You did. The room erupted. Shouts. Flashing cameras. People standing to whisper to each other. Ramsey stood up suddenly, chair screeching behind him. This is character assassination. This is exposure, Clara replied. And it's long overdue. Parrish from the ethics board rose, visibly shaken. I need time to process this information. You'll have it, Clara said. But let the record reflect that I am voluntarily recusing myself to protect the process, not because I was pressured, not because I was intimidated, and not because I will be silent. Then she turned to the reporters, voice resonating like a bell through the room. This city has protected a system of unchecked power for far too long. Today is not about a slap. It's about what happens when someone believes they can act without consequence, because every layer above them is willing to look the other way. Asterisk. She looked directly at Ramsey. Asterisk, those layers are crumbling. Asterisk. Ramsey left the courtroom in a blur of whispered phone calls and sweat. Parrish followed. Clara turned to Keenan Carter, exhaling slowly. Asterisk, you think they'll come after you? Asterisk, Carter asked quietly. Clara didn't hesitate. Asterisk, they already have. Asterisk. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You need to stop. Just that. No name. No threat. Just 5 chilling words. She showed the screen to Keen. Keen read it, then said, asterisk, good. That means we're hitting nerves. Asterisk. Clara looked out the window of the courtroom toward the line of city buildings, the offices, the rooftops, hiding secrets.